growth, development, and mobility around the city of Charlotte. In today's meeting, we'll provide a brief overview of what was covered in that informational meeting, including the purpose of each of these two maps and how they relate to each other. The majority of today's meeting, however, will be a community conversation around the draft Charlotte Future 2040 policy map. We want to provide an up-close look at how the 2040 policy map recommendations were developed within this community, this geography. And then we want to talk about how we might need to revise the citywide mapping approach to make it more accurate or better aligned with the comprehensive plan. So given the limited time that we have today, we're going to be focusing on capturing all your comments and questions, and we're going to consolidate everything we've heard from this meeting series and post responses and answers online. That said, I'll try to respond to questions and comments today as much as possible. So with that, let's briefly review what was covered in that informational meeting. Oh, you can't see my screen. I apologize. Let me share. Sorry about that. 1 second. Okay, this should do it. All right, sorry about that. You didn't really miss anything too major, just some intro slides. Can you see it now?
I can.
Yes.
Great. Pretty important stuff there. All right. So yes, let's briefly review what was covered in that informational meeting. So what is the purpose of the 2040 policy map and the streets map? The purpose of these two maps is to help implement the vision of the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan, which is the guiding document for our city's growth and development over the next 20 years. So the Charlotte 2040 Comprehensive Plan was adopted in June 2021, and there are now several major initiatives underway to help put the plan into action, including those shown on the bottom half of this slide. So the 2040 policy map will identify appropriate locations for future development in our community. The streets map will define the multimodal vision for Charlotte streets to support mobility between the places we live, work, and play. And the Unified Development Ordinance will consolidate and update the city's land development regulations, so future development is aligned with the vision of the comprehensive plan. A draft of the Unified Development Ordinance was released on October 7th, and more information about this initiative can be found at cltgov.me/CLT future. And we can put that link in the chat as well. So the 2040 policy map and the streets map will both help implement the vision of the comprehensive plan, and they'll help accomplish this by informing how our built environment evolves and changes over time. So the built environment includes both land use and transportation related characteristics. So each map provides supporting information about the places we want to create. In particular, the 2040 policy map will inform the type of development, including land use and building form, that is appropriate to occur in specific geographies throughout the community. And the streets map will define the future cross sections for and streetscape requirements for arterials across the city. So with an understanding that both maps are intended to help implement the vision of the comprehensive plan, and that they'll both help inform the city's built environment over time, let's briefly take a closer look at the streets map and then the 2040 policy map. So what makes a street? A street looks, feels, and functions the way it does based on all of the pieces extending from building front to building front. All of the components in between are important. This is a diagram of what we call a street cross section. So you can see in this diagram how the various components of the street work together to serve all users and to create streets that allow people to move about our city in more ways more easily. So the streets map is the mapped vision of our multimodal street network. It's based on council adopted policies that have been developed and refined over the last several years. It shows the recommended cross-section for all of Charlotte's arterial streets and will support both the 2040 policy map and the Unified Development Ordinance to ensure that we're providing for multimodal streets as we grow and develop. So the streets map is currently in a draft state. We want to remind you that you can go online to review and provide comments on the streets map along with the policy map through November 14th. In the map, you can click on an arterial street and there'll be a pop-up box that includes information about the street cross section that you can review and provide comments on. There are more detailed instructions for how to review and comment on the map in a demonstration video available at cltgov.me/CLT-future. And Aaron just put that in the chat as well. So today we're going to be focusing more on the 2040 policy map, but if you do have any questions or comments about streets or the streets map, feel free to put those in the chat and we'll collect all of those and pass them along to the streets team who will post responses on their project website. So moving on to the 2040 policy map, this is a companion document to the comprehensive plan and will translate the plan's place-based policies to specific geographies in the community. Place-based policies are those in the plan that provide guidance for where and how development should occur. When adopted, the 2040 policy map will replace the city's current policy map called the Future Land Use Map. This map aims to provide comprehensive and citywide direction for how Charlotte will balance both the needs and opportunities that come with future projected growth. This mapping effort will also ensure we align future growth with infrastructure capacity so we grow smartly and maximize our resources. And finally, the 2040 policy map citywide direction means we can ensure historically underserved areas are guaranteed better access in the future and Charlotte becomes a more equitable city. Since the objective of this mapping effort is to evaluate and balance citywide needs and opportunities, the 2040 policy map will not provide parcel-specific analysis that has historically occurred during the small area planning process. So the 2040 policy map was developed using a new tool called place types and followed a three-step process. Place types are a new classification system to organize patterns of development. They are not zoning districts. Place types are more complete and holistic than the city's current classification system, which is called future land use. So place types provide guidance for the mix and proportions of land use, building form and design, mobility, and open space. The place types tool was vetted by the community during the development of the comprehensive plan. Stakeholders provided input on the types of places that were right for Charlotte. The 2040 policy map process applies the place types vetted during the comprehensive plan to specific geographies throughout our community. Using the new place types tool, the draft 2040 policy map was developed following 3 steps. So the first step was to translate existing development on the ground today into place types. This step was completed to illustrate how place types are intended to be applied at half block or block level, and it's a helpful point of reference. The second step was to translate the city's adopted area plans and zone districts into place types. So this second map illustrates how Charlotte would grow if we did nothing different and did not map the comprehensive plan policies. So we're calling the second map the adopted policies map. And then the third step built upon that second map to reflect the comprehensive plan policies. So by building off the other adopted policies map, this process doesn't erase past planning efforts that are still valuable to our community. Instead, it respects what's working for our community and only revises the shortcomings that fail to address the city's current and future needs. So here's a bit more detail on what went into each of those 3 mapping steps. The first major input for the adopted policies map, that second map, included future land use recommendations from area plans adopted since 2010. So this guidance accounts for approximately 27% of our land area. The remaining portions of the city on the second map were informed by zoning or existing entitlements. So in instances where zoning or the existing zoning district didn't clearly translate to one place type in particular, we used a market analysis to identify what was the most realistic future use of a property. And then the major inputs used to revise that second map and produce a draft 2040 map include the equitable growth framework and preservation policies from the comprehensive plan. And then the draft recommendations were checked against several other data sources, such as our growth projections, environment and infrastructure capacity, and market realities. So the place types palette itself includes 10 different place types. Those are shown on this page, but they generally fall into 3 categories: places we live, places we work, and places we play. So in the live category, we've got parks and preserves, and then we've got 2 scales of neighborhoods, neighborhood 1 and neighborhood 2. Neighborhood 2 is a higher density. And then in the work category, we've got commercial, campus, innovation, mixed use, and manufacturing and logistics. And then in the play category, we have 3 scales of mixed use activity centers. So those are neighborhood, community, and regional activity centers. Here's a bit more information on the place type palette of our 10 place types that we'll be looking at today. More information about these, if you need a little more background information, is on the city's website. So we can put that link in the chat as well. I'll leave them up for just a second so we can get familiar before we dive in. Okay. So the phase 2 community conversations that we're hosting now are organized around 15 community planning areas. Today's meeting is intended to walk through how the process played out in the Southwest Outer community planning area. So generally this area is bounded by Dixie River Road, I-45, the Mecklenburg County boundary, and Lake Wylie. So as I mentioned, the mapping approach began by translating what's on the ground today, and then what future place types would look like without the comprehensive plan. So this first map reflects existing development translated into the new place type tool. So this translation was based on existing land use data and development patterns. In this community planning area, you can see we've got a lot of this purple color, which is manufacturing and logistics place type. And then the light yellow is neighborhood 1. We've also got a good amount of green, parks and preserves place type. And then along South Tryon Street, currently there's a mix of neighborhood 2 in orange, commercial in red, and some campus in a teal color. So this second step in the mapping approach was to translate the city's adopted policies and existing entitlements into place types. So the net change from the existing development map to this map is shown on the right side of the slide. You can see that campus is generally being absorbed into neighborhoods. So it's likely schools or other community uses, small campus sites. And then a lot of the neighborhood 2 is going away based on adopted policy. And I know that Steel Creek plan in this area provided a lot of guidance on future land use and then place types for this map. So we've got a bit more manufacturing and logistics in purple, and then we've got a lot more community activity center in blue. So that replaces some of the existing commercial and other uses. And then you'll also notice a lot of the parks and preserves went away. So that might be based on what the existing zoning is for those parcels. Maybe they're not publicly owned. They could be actually zoned for low density residential. So that's not something that's necessarily preserved as part of this mapping step, but something that's important to us in the comprehensive plan. So again, this map reflects how Charlotte would grow and change if we didn't implement recommendations from the comprehensive plan. So now we want to walk through how place types were revised from that last adopted policies map to better align with the vision of the community and the comprehensive plan. So first we'll look at mapping of the preservation policies. So now we're looking at the first 3 place types on the 2040 policy map. The comprehensive plan includes policies to preserve these 3 place types: neighborhood 1, parks and preserves, and manufacturing and logistics. So those are on the map in yellow, green, and purple. So in some areas, as you saw, these place types were already preserved based on the adopted policies map, but the areas highlighted in blue are additional areas where these place types were preserved as part of this 2040 policy mapping step. So again, you can see the % change in these place types assignments on the right side of the slide. This is the change from that previous adopted policies map to the 2040 map. So you can see manufacturing logistics stayed pretty similar, but we were able to preserve a lot more parks and preserves on the 2040 map as part of these preservation policies. So as we step through each of these groupings of place types and policies on the 2040 map, We'd like to ask you some questions along the way about what you've seen reflected in the draft map so far. So we think a number of steps described in the current mapping approach are accomplishing the goals of the comprehensive plan, but we'd like to hear whether or not you agree. So later in this session, we'll have a chance to talk about potential changes to the mapping approach, and we'll also be taking a closer look at manufacturing and logistics a bit later in our meeting today. So our first question for you is the mapping step to preserve Neighborhood 1 and Parks and Preserves aligns with the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan's direction to protect community assets. And we're asking whether or not you strongly agree or strongly disagree or somewhere in between. And we've just launched a Zoom poll that you should be able to respond to. So we'll give that about 30 seconds or a minute for people to respond. Okay. And Javier, I see you have your hand up. Do you have a question?
Yeah, if because you're asking here about Parks Preserve specifically, if we can go back to map 1, 2, and 3 again, let's walk through those. I just want to point out a few things that I'm a little confused or need some clarification on. So
sure. So did you want to look at the existing
let's look
map?
at one. Let's look at one first. Yeah. One first. Okay. So we see that in the lower left-hand side, you've got a lot of fingers off of Lake Wiley highlighted here in green, right? You can kind of see those. Those are the real jagged edged fingers that's in the Palisades area. If we go to the next slide, the next map 2, we see that they're gone, right? And this isn't necessarily valid because it's not really a neighborhood 1. It remains parks and preserves. They can't build on water. Okay, then we go to map 3 and we see it's reinstituted, and I'm not sure the point here of trying to reinflate the change here. We're saying it's up 128%. And my concern here really is, what impact do those manipulations of the numbers have overall? Is that trying to give yourselves a good pat on the back here for showing that we're increasing parks and preserves, because we're really not doing anything?
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the comment. Yeah, so this is the citywide mapping approach that we use. So we were looking at preserving existing parks and preserves and these other place types citywide. So it seems like maybe in this area there was something with the zoning, but I think that's a great point that with water it's not developable anyway. So we can factor that into any revisions we make to the map. But this is just zooming in on one section of the city and demonstrating the citywide mapping approach. But I appreciate you pointing that out.
Well, the follow-up is really I understand the consistent approach, right? But this is, an area that we know well down here. It's where we live, work, play, right? So we're giving you the feedback, and I'm just wondering, what those, we have to adjust those numbers if they have some sort of, impact, with regards to, other areas, right? Because we could be saying, well, we're really expanding parks and preserves. See, that would account for the decrease in maybe another place type. And so I don't know that would be an accurate representation. I'm giving you a specific example here for that.
Sure. Yeah, I hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay. Great.
What we're doing today is collecting all this feedback, and then we're going to go through it all. We have got a series of about, I think, 30 different meetings in different community planning areas. So we're going to gather all that feedback and then see how we might revise the mapping approach for the next draft of this map based on what we're hearing through these
Sounds
meetings.
good.
So
All right.
appreciate it. Okay, so next we're looking at mapping of access to housing opportunity policies. These are part of the Equitable Growth Framework in the Comprehensive Plan. So the Comprehensive Plan calls for creating a more equitable future for all of Charlotte, which means we need to ensure future growth and development benefits everyone. So in order to measure who does and doesn't currently benefit from past development, the Comprehensive Plan included the Equitable Growth Framework, which assesses which areas have low access to housing diversity, jobs, goods and services, and which areas are impacted by environmental justice issues. So on this map, areas outside the black diagonal hatches were identified as lacking access to housing diversity. So again, outside the black hatches, lacking access to housing diversity currently. So this means you can't easily find a variety of housing types in these areas. The bullet points on this page are the metrics that were used to understand where access to housing is currently lacking during the comprehensive plan. This step in the mapping approach was focused on making place type recommendations that would provide better opportunity to housing unit diversity. The items that aren't underlined on the slide can really happen within any neighborhood, and therefore other tools outside of place types will be explored to help address those gaps. So neighborhood 2 is a place type that helps provide more housing opportunities throughout through housing unit diversity. So here you can see in orange where neighborhood 2 is mapped. We evaluated a number of features when looking for housing opportunities, including sensitive environmental features, development status, so whether an area is undeveloped or underdeveloped, proximity to transit, proximity to other place type assignments, land suitability for different uses and densities, and more. So in some areas, neighborhood 2 is already mapped based on adopted policies. The areas highlighted in blue again show additional areas where neighborhood 2 is recommended as part of this step. So you can see that a lot of neighborhood 2 on this map is highlighted in that blue color. So that means it was added as part of this 2040 policy mapping step. And here's a clean version of the first 4 place types on the 2040 policy map, now with that orange neighborhood 2 added in. I'll also point out that activity center place types, which we'll get to in a few slides, can also help increase housing opportunities. So we're just kind of breaking it down, just looking at neighborhood 2 right now. So again, we want to ask you a question about this step of the mapping process. The question is mapping more neighborhood 2 in areas with low access to housing opportunity a good approach to increasing housing diversity in the future? So we've got another poll that just popped up. We're wondering if you agree or not that neighborhood 2 can help provide increased housing diversity. And again, this is a citywide type of question. So opportunities are, there's more opportunities in some parts of the city, less opportunities in some areas of the city, but generally we're trying to help fill those housing gaps throughout. We have about 30 more seconds for everyone to participate in the poll. About 5 more seconds. If you haven't voted yet, please do. All right. Looks like we had 25% strongly agree, 50% agree, and 25% neutral. Okay, so next we're going to look at access to employment opportunity policies. This is the second component of the Equitable Growth Framework. So on this map, areas outside the black diagonal hatches are lacking existing access to employment opportunity. The bullet points on this page are the metrics that were used to understand where access currently is lacking. So the place type mapping aimed to provide the opportunity for employment within a commute shed. So about 1.5 miles of every neighborhood, but not necessarily within every neighborhood. The items that aren't underlined can happen within any employment area, and therefore, again, we'd look at other tools outside of place types to help address those gaps. So campus and innovation mixed use are two place types that can help provide more employment opportunities within close proximity to neighborhoods. Again, we evaluated a number of features when looking for employment opportunities similar to the housing opportunity step. So ultimately, there were pretty limited opportunities to map these two place types in this community planning area, so campus and innovation mixed use. Again, activity centers can provide some more employment opportunities as well, so we'll look at that in the next step. And then here's just a clean version of the map. And again, I don't think that there were really actually any opportunities for campus or innovation mixed use in this particular community planning area. Javier, question?
Hi, Ellie. Yes. So, just stepping back to the black hashed blocks map. Just scratching my head here on that lower left, and probably similar for other areas. Why is there existing equitable access to employment down in that lower left portion and, other areas? I can see, we've got that kind of that C-shaped block going over Rivergate and, along some of that area, the shopping center. But here along the lakefront, why did it trigger this designation?
That's a great question. I think that's one we're going to just have to record and post a response back to you later on the website. I don't have all that data that was used in the comprehensive plan, but I totally understand your question. And
because there's no retail down there, no commercial really. It's all just mostly just police type 1, right? Or parks and rec. So I mean, I would expect it just kind of jumps out. So thank you.
Sure. Thanks for pointing that out. Okay, so here we've got another poll question. This one is mapping campus and innovation mixed use in areas with low access to jobs, a good approach to increasing job access in the future. And again, this is really a citywide mapping approach question. We recognize there's limited opportunities based on existing development and other factors for these two place types in this area in particular. Give it about 5 more seconds for anyone who wants to vote. All right, looks like we got 20% for strongly agree, 40% for agree, and 40% for neutral. Cool. Thanks to everyone who's participating in those. Okay, so next we're going to look at the mapping of access to essential amenities, goods, and services policies. So that's the third component of the equitable growth framework in the comprehensive plan. So in this map, areas outside of the black diagonal hatches are lacking existing access to essential amenities, goods, and services. The bullet points on this page are the metrics that we use to understand where access is currently lacking. The underlying metrics were specifically identified as items place type mapping could help address. So that's access to fresh food, healthcare and pharmacies, and financial services. The items that aren't underlined can be provided really in any place type, and therefore other tools, again, outside of place types will be explored to help address those gaps. So those other tools might be things like programming or design solutions, infrastructure projects, etc. So commercial and activity centers are place types that can help provide more access to amenities. Here you can see in red, pink, and blue, where these, I think 3 of these 4 place types are mapped within this community planning area. So in some areas, again, these place types were already mapped based on adopted policies. The areas highlighted in blue show additional areas where these place types were recommended as part of this 2040 policy mapping step. So again, here we evaluated a number of features when looking for opportunities to improve access and amenities. So here's a clean version of that map. So this is actually the complete 2040 policy map in this planning area. So you can see we've got more community activity center in blue along South Tryon in a couple locations, especially a larger community activity center at Steel Creek and South Tryon. So converting some of that, potentially looking at converting some of that commercial use into more of a mixed use, higher density activity center. We've got the parks and preserves in green, a lot of neighborhood 1 in yellow, and then much of the industrial is still there in purple. There's a couple of small neighborhood centers in pink shown along South Tryon as well. And then we've got some commercial in neighborhood 2 up at near Steel Creek Road in 485. So our question here is about activity centers. So is mapping activity centers in areas with low access to goods and services a good approach to increasing access to goods and services in the future? So we're just wondering if you agree with that mapping approach. I'll just go back to the map if anyone wants to get a closer look. Give it about 5 more seconds. All right, looks like we got 2 responses for agree, 50%, and 50% for neutral. I see a question in the chat from Kara. While it's noted on here, I'm not seeing any high capacity transit options noted. Yeah, so I don't think there is any planned high capacity transit in this portion of the city. Okay, so the last component of the equitable growth framework is environmental justice. So on this map, areas outside the black diagonal hatches are impacted by environmental justice issues. So you can see most of this community planning area is not impacted. The bullet points on this page are the metrics that were used to understand where environmental justice is currently lacking. So new, more intense place types are not mapped in the floodplain. This mapping effort also used buffering and transitions as much as possible to reduce proximity between neighborhoods and heavy industrial uses or major transportation infrastructure. Opportunities to provide that buffering through place types were limited based on existing development. So again, we would look at other tools outside of place types to help address these inequities. So that could be things like design solutions, infrastructure projects, that sort of thing. So you'll see on the map, of course, this community planning area has a lot of manufacturing logistics, which is an industrial type use in purple. And there are neighborhoods that abut that use in this area. And then there's also the highways. So that's where you get some of those proximity potential issues as well. So knowing that using the place types tool to provide that buffering was a bit limited based on existing development, our question is, how important is it to explore additional tools to further mitigate environmental justice impacts during the community area planning process? And we do have another question about manufacturing and logistics coming up in a few slides as well. Okay, about 5 more seconds again. All right, looks like we've got 40% for very important, 40% for important, and 20% for neutral. Okay, so next we want to highlight what the above or previously mentioned place type recommendations mean for this area in terms of attracting new housing units and future jobs. So the city of Charlotte is projected to grow by almost 150,000 housing units by 2040. Given the place type recommendations within this community planning area, this area would be projected to capture over 11,000 housing units, or approximately 8% of all new housing units citywide by 2040. And then looking at jobs, the city of Charlotte is projected to grow by almost 200,000 jobs by 2040. So given the place type recommendations within this community planning area, this area would be projected to capture about 13,700 new jobs, or approximately 7% of all new jobs citywide. So now that we've walked through the draft 2040 policy map recommendations for this area, we'd like to get your feedback on the draft mapping approach. So the objective of this conversation is to collect feedback both on the current steps of the mapping approach as well as potential revisions to the approach. There's really two types of feedback that we can use to revise the citywide mapping approach. One is to identify additional steps to add to the methodology, which would help better align the final map with the comprehensive plan. And then we can discuss potential adjustments to the current mapping steps that would help improve the accuracy of the map. Again, what this process can't do is incorporate parcel-specific revisions that don't inform overall an overall change to the citywide mapping approach. Since this is a citywide mapping effort, it must balance future needs and opportunities citywide. Okay, so we recognize that the current mapping approach is just a starting point. We might need to add some additional steps to better align the map with the comprehensive plan. So we want to share a few suggestions that we have for additional steps and with you, and see if you agree or not with those suggestions. So the additional steps that we've heard from our interdepartmental stakeholders are related to 3 of the 10 place types. So first, let's look at manufacturing and logistics. We've heard from our partners in economic development that some of the existing manufacturing and logistics sites, especially close to Uptown, may be better suited for other uses due to the changing needs of the manufacturing industry. So our question for you, is it more important to preserve existing manufacturing and logistics sites, or is it more important to consider where repurposing these areas may better serve other community needs in the future? We've got this poll launched again. The question is it more important to preserve manufacturing and logistics or to consider repurposing it in certain areas? And if anyone has any other comments, feel free to put them in the chat as well. Give it about 5 more seconds. Okay, we got about 50% for neutral and 50% for more important to consider repurposing manufacturing and logistics rather than preserve. Thank you for your responses. So next, let's look at what we've observed related to neighborhood 2. So we've noticed that there's a lot of large single-family lots located along major transportation corridors in the city. These sites could potentially evolve in the future to become more of a neighborhood 2 place site and provide more housing options in the future along that existing major transportation infrastructure. So our question for you is it more important to preserve existing single-family lots or to provide more housing options along major transportation corridors in particular? And again, this is a 20-year outlook, looking out to about 2040. So nothing happening overnight. Okay, just a few more seconds.
Hey, Ellie, this is Javier. So I see it's 12:42 already. Are we going to get to a conversation point, or is this going to be just a poll gathering exercise today?
Yep, we're gonna pull up the map in just a couple slides here so you can provide your
All
feedback
right.
on it.
All right.
All right, looks like we've got 20% more important to preserve single family, 20% neutral, and 60% more important to provide more housing options. Okay, we've got one more poll here. So finally, commercial place type. So we've heard from some of our planning colleagues that a lot of the existing commercial development throughout Charlotte doesn't align with the comprehensive plan's vision for walkable and integrated communities. So we wanted to ask you, how important is it that commercial places in this community planning area evolve into a neighborhood activity center? So a neighborhood activity center is more of a mixed use environment. It might have different building form, different mobility options as well than a commercial place type.
Ellie, to help out, can you give an example of what you're talking about here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So sometimes, in our neighborhoods, there's like a little node of commercial uses at a intersection. So, maybe it's one or two shops or businesses. So those are locations that could evolve over the next 20 years to provide more of a mix of uses, maybe more amenities to the surrounding neighborhoods, and take on a different form than they have today. So really, it could be commercial uses surrounded by existing neighborhoods. Maybe it's commercial near parks and preserves, or along more major streets, but just generally looking to see if there's interest for evolving those places over time into more mixed use and a bit more dense places in your neighborhoods.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll give it another second or two here. So it looks like we got 50% for very important, 25% for important, and 25% for neutral. Okay, so finally, we want to talk about any concerns you have with the draft map. So by talking through your specific concerns, we expect we'll be able to identify adjustments to the mapping approach and help make the next draft map more accurate. So I'm just going to skip ahead here for the sake of time. So since we can't be sitting around a table and marking up a map together, we're going to use the annotate tool in Zoom. If you're on your phone today, this will be a pretty hard tool to use. So I'd like to point you towards the project website instead, and anyone else who wants to go there and provide more feedback, you're welcome to. There's an interactive place types map that you can provide comments on. So for those of you on a computer, if possible, you're going to open the annotate tool. So you're going to look for the black menu bar, or maybe it's a drop-down view options menu on your screen. Everyone's screen tends to look a little bit different. You're going to look for the annotate button and select the stamp tool. So we're going to use the heart stamp just because it's kind of the easiest one to see on the map. And then we're going to share the map in just a second here. So you can click on the map to place your heart stamp. If you need to fix or remove a stamp, you can use the eraser tool or the undo button. And then you can click the mouse button to get back to your normal mouse. So we're going to pull up the map and then give everyone a chance to place their heart stamps. Remember, we're just using the heart because it's easiest to see, but really you can place the stamp anywhere you have a concern or you want to discuss something. And then after everyone has placed their stamps, we're going to save a screenshot and we can discuss where the stamps landed on the map. So here's the full place types map for this, or full 2040 policy map for this community planning area. So you can go ahead and start placing stamps. If anyone has any issues with the tool, feel free to speak up or put it in the chat and I can help you get it figured out. So again, placing the heart stamp anywhere you want to discuss further, or maybe have a question or comment about. We'll give everyone just about a minute or two to do so. All right, let's give it about 30 more seconds and we can start discussing. Okay, so we'll go ahead and save a screenshot, and then let's see if we can talk about, see about 4 stamps on the map. So hopefully we can touch on them all before we run out of time here. So first, I think you can see my cursor, but there's a stamp on this Parks and Preserves area on the west side of the community planning area. Does whoever placed that stamp, do you have a question or comment you would like to speak up about over there?
Hi, Ellie. This is Alonzo. And yes, I placed that stamp there because I don't think what's shown on the map actually represents the full area of the preserve. I think that shading is incomplete.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. We can add that to our notes and look at that. Then I see a stamp, let's see, on the neighborhood 2 on South Tryon Street here. Anyone want to speak to that one?
Hey, Ellie, this is Javier. So similar to what Orlando is pointing out, I think we definitely want to look more closely at, the not only the approved but not necessarily built amendments for different housing out there in the Palisades, but just to see, just look at it overall. And this is a big reason why I know that Dave Wiggins on the call and myself have been working with Councilwoman Watlington to have a dedicated meeting with your team. I see Tyler was on the call as well, so I know he's aware of that. To do that exactly, really look at the overlays and make sure that we're as accurate as we can be.
Sounds great. Thanks, Javier. Then let's see, we've got a heart down here in the neighborhood 1.
This is David Wiggins. I have a question about neighborhood 1. We had a situation where the area plan recommended R3 in an area, but a developer wanted to build townhouses. And we said, your townhouses are inconsistent with the area plan and we will oppose it. And they eventually withdrew their rezoning and are going to go with the R3 zoning that they have. But the neighborhood 1 place type includes a wide variety of housing types, including townhouses. So under the 2040 plan, in this situation, if this area is identified as neighborhood 1 and neighborhood 1 place type includes townhouses, I believe it's N1D zoning, they can come back and say, well, this is consistent with the place type, and so you should approve and let us build townhouses here. And is that correct? Is it correct that developers can request townhouses or similar development in neighborhood 1 and say it is consistent with the place type that is recommended for that area?
Thanks, Dave, for the question. Yeah, so you're correct. In neighborhood 1, there is a variety of housing products that can be a part of that place type. It is a lower density than neighborhood 2. For actual like zoning changes and zoning regulations, including like density and that sort of thing, that would be part of the UDO process that's ongoing, Unified Development Ordinance. So I would point you towards the draft of that that's online, so you can see what zone districts might be allowed in a neighborhood 1 place type, and then you can provide your feedback on those zone
Well,
districts.
Townhouses are allowed in neighborhood 1. That is, I believe that's in 1D.
Okay.
So it seems possible that everything in the neighborhood 1 area on this map could be townhouses.
If it were to redevelop, yeah, I suppose that's possible, but in terms of what exactly is allowed in the place types, again, it's part of the UDO effort. We've got the place types palette established as part of the comprehensive plan, and how that translates to regulatory zoning. I just encourage you to provide your feedback. There's a draft of it online, and it would be a great place for you to give like specific feedback about how you feel about allowing townhouses in neighborhood 1 before that's finalized.
Oh, okay. I guess, okay. Can I
Sorry,
ask
so we
another
can-
question?
Yeah, and I was just gonna say we can put a link to the UDO in the draft UDO plan in the chat as well, so you can provide that level of detail. And Kara says she'd like a link to it as well. Okay, great. So we'll put a link in there so you can have a easy access to provide that feedback for that process. And what was the other question?
You were talking about not mapping at the parcel level, and I didn't understand. Could you clarify that, please?
Yeah, sure. So this is a citywide mapping effort. So we're using, a mapping methodology that has a number of steps. And it's really a citywide approach. So we're not zooming in and making parcel specific changes. We're using a citywide methodology to make sure mapping is consistent across the city rather than zooming in too much. There will be the community area planning processes that will be coming next later after this map is complete, and that will provide the opportunity for more of like a zoom in detailed look for your maybe different communities' visions across the city. So it's just that this is a citywide mapping effort, and so we're kind of zoomed out a click in terms of like exact level of detail.
Well, we do have individual parcels, and I don't know. That doesn't, okay, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, if I can clarify a little more, really, we're just trying to, have an equitable approach across the whole city. So we're not asking for feedback about what one parcel should be or another, but looking at changes citywide that we can make to the process as part of this effort. Okay, and I see one more heart up here in the commercial area on the north side of the community planning area. Anyone want to speak to that one?
Sure, yeah, that's me, Phil Gussman. I was actually just highlighting that as one of the potential areas where I believe it's been a while since I've been over in that particular street, though. One of those commercial areas that might be a good transition to a neighborhood activity center or community activity center.
Great, thanks. Appreciate that. Yeah, so that's something I think we're going to add into the methodology moving forward, is trying to find a good way to identify those across the city. So I appreciate that feedback. And I see one other heart over here at the high capacity transit line stations on the legend. I'm not sure if that was intentional. If someone had oh, okay. I think this is Kara's intentional. She's putting in the chat. She can only type, so we'll give you a second to type your comment in, Kara, if you'd like.
Ellie, while we wait for Kara's input here, I'm just wondering, the manufacturing and logistics section along Westinghouse Boulevard, is that showing where it is today versus projections for 2040?
Sure. So this map is the 2040 maps. This is the future looking place type assignments.
Is there anything that shows what it is today? Like, so we can see whether it's growing, and if it is growing, in which direction.
Yeah, so I can go back to our existing place type map. Let's see, Aaron or Maria, did you guys, or Molly, did you guys get the screenshot so I can switch the slide?
Yes, I did. I already took a screenshot.
Okay, thank you. So I'm gonna clear this. Let me just go back to that existing map. Lorenzo.
And I apologize, I got disconnected earlier, so I missed some of this.
Oh, no problem. Sorry, it's a lot of slides back. Okay, so here's the existing development map. So this is based on existing land use and development patterns. So you can see the purple here is that manufacturing and logistics, and there's some more like red commercial type uses mixed in a bit as well. And I can flip back and forth. So this is the second map in the step in the process, which is translating adopted policies from adopted area plans from the last since 2010 and existing zoning and entitlements into place types. So you can see the outline doesn't change much. It's a bit of growth in manufacturing and logistics, and some of that vacant land in gray. It's becoming manufacturing and logistics.
And where's one? I see there's some, I guess that's the neighborhood 2, which I believe you said was higher density housing bordering it when you flipped. There.
Mm-hmm. So what was your question?
So that's gone away. So this right here, this is the existing. So the proposal is to remove that land use surrounding it, so that where it's now set up to be high density housing or neighborhood 2, that'll switch into manufacturing and logistics, it looks like.
So yeah, so some of it is in that purple area. Some of it goes to neighborhood 1. And again, this map is based off adopted area plans and zoning. So not necessarily a new proposal, just reflecting how Charlotte would grow if we didn't apply the comprehensive plan policies. So basically that means that these orange neighborhood 2 areas are actually zoned for something else. I'm seeing some of it turn blue actually, which means that it's becoming part of a larger mixed use center, which would allow for that same type of use within it, just as part of a larger mix of uses. So incorporating neighborhood 2 into a community activity center.
Okay. Which part of the planning process, if one wanted to engage in conversations about the transitions from manufacturing and logistics from that purple section into one of the neighborhood place types, where would be the area where one would inject him or herself into those discussions surrounding how that occurs?
That's a great question. So to start, you can provide more detailed feedback on our online map and point out areas in particular where you think those transitions are important to consider. I'm just going to flip ahead a few slides. So based on like some of the constraints and opportunities in the area, we were only able to provide those buffers through place types so much. So I think what you're asking is those additional tools, how can you weigh in on those? So those will be for one, it would be part of the UDO. So it could be something in the zoning regulations, like there needs to be a buffer provided between a neighborhood and a manufacturing use or something like that, or design considerations. So for one, I would say you can leave comments on the 2040 map online about specific areas. And then you can also weigh in on what the draft UDO zone districts are requiring. And you can do that in the other project online.
Okay, because I do see on this map, a lot of that abuts Wingate Park, around that area, and Lake Wiley, which of course could be concerning, depending on how how those place types actually grow, what they evolve to become in the future.
Yeah, thank you. Agreed. It's definitely an important piece of this environmental justice component of the equitable growth framework. So any feedback you have on that would be appreciated. Thanks for pointing that out. And Kara, I see your comment about high capacity transit. We've noted that and we'll add it to our our comments from this meeting, and we can pass that along to transportation staff at the city as well. So we're 2 minutes over, so I'm going to wrap up. But again, please feel free to provide additional comments on our online map forum. We're continuing these community conversations through November 10th. So those are all going to be recorded and available on the project website. And there's makeup sessions scheduled for each area as well. So feel free to join another community conversation if you're interested. We're hoping to do some in-person office hours contingent upon COVID protocols. So you can check the project website if you're interested in that. And then, yeah, again, the online comment application will be available through November 14th with hard copies available in libraries and YMCAs across the city. We're going to use your feedback to identify citywide revisions to the policy mapping approach. And then we should have a second draft of the 2040 policy map expected early next year. So thank you all for your participation and your comments today. We really appreciate it, and hope to see you at another one of these meetings.
Thank you, Ellie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.